It's all about shaking things up, but also giving people the tools and resources that they can instantly apply to set themselves up for long-term success. It took me a few years to start being proud of it and realize that a lot of my success was coming from people being so comfortable being around me. In its most simplest form, I help people to perform better than they're currently performing, and it is both in and out of the workplace.
Welcome to Swift Coaches Academy, a podcast dedicated to bringing health and wellness professionals the uncensored truth behind what it really takes to succeed in the health industry with me, your host, Xenia Wood. As an accredited exercise physiologist and business owner for almost a decade, I'm on a mission to transform the lives of ambitious health professionals like you who want more and are ready to take action to create incredible impact in your careers and unlock financial freedom in your business. So join me as I speak candidly with industry leaders about the struggles and successes from within the trenches through thought-provoking conversations. Miss Candice Harvey, how are you?
Oh, I love that little voice. I am so well. I'm so excited to be here.
I felt like I was talking to like a school teacher for a second. I was like, hi, Mrs. Harvey. You've just got like your fun, are they chili earrings on?
Yeah, they are. They're cute, aren't they? Little chili.
Very cute. And then like the red top that matches.
I know,
you're always a bundle of fun in like personality, but also like the colors that you bring out. And I love that.
Oh gosh, the pressure now for this episode to match the vibrancy now that you've set this up, babe. But no, it's going to be great.
I don't think you could do anything less.
No, yeah, to tone it down might be a little bit of a struggle. So yeah, I think we're going to be okay today. We're going to be all right.
So let's dive into who you are. And I mean, obviously we connected through a networking group recently, and I just feel like there are so many performance coaches who are like coming into my space, and they seem to be my people. And I love it because typically they have, this NLP background and this real coaching background, but your story started, I'm sure before HR, but from that HR background, can you talk to like how you got to be a performance coach and what the heck that means to you?
I definitely can do that. I also feel like I want to be able to say how I met you properly at the networking event, because I feel like it's quite a funny story in terms of when I didn't know your name, but the moment I sort of met you, I liked you. Shall I share it? I'm going to share it anyway.
Go for it. I think I know the story. It's great.
It's really great. I mean, it got a few people looking like I had two heads, but that's actually standard for Candice Harvey. So I remember you got up and you were talking about your business, and I instantly gravitated, and that just happens with certain people, right? You like their energy, you like what they're talking about, or even visually you look at them and you're like, you're a bit cute, whatever it is, right? And I wanted to be able to get in contact with you because what you were asking for in terms of business, I knew someone, so I was all excited to talk to you, but I missed your name. I didn't actually hear what your name was. And you might get that a lot because obviously you got a different name, babe. So it's like, I didn't hear it. Like it sounded different. I didn't know what it was. So I actually said to the guy beside me, who just happened to be another performance coach, I was like, who's the chick with the really cute bod? And he instantly just said your name. Instantly. And I was like,
didn't look up, didn't like confirm.
Didn't sort of go, oh, well, it could be, because there was, I don't know how many people were at that breakfast, but there was a bucket load, and he instantly said your name and then laughed and looked at me saying, was that bad that I knew exactly who you were talking about? I was like, no, look at her. She has the cutest bod. So then obviously I had to go over and tell you, and he heard me telling you, and he's like, did you just tell her that I knew that she had a cute bod? I was like, we all know, mate. We all know she has a cute bod. So I just felt like I needed to share that because it was
Thank you. I feel like whenever people say that to me, I'm like, well, my body is my business. And I mean, everyone's body is their business, like just it should be, but literally like I work in exercise. And so like if I am not actually looking the part, then it's like, you're not going to trust me, and you're instantly going to have these like, oh, can she really help me with those sorts of things? So I appreciate that, because I've been working my butt off at CrossFit recently, and I've started to see some like new ab definition coming through. It's great.
Yeah, it's all there. It's a little bit annoying that it's all there, but we all saw it, and show it off, babe. Show it off. It's great.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. All right. Now back to you, back to your story.
Sure.
Go for it.
Okay. So, yeah, I guess my background is human resources. So I worked in HR for 15 years, and I, went straight from school, typical story, to, well, I better go to university, and didn't really know what I was going to do at uni. I was always interested in business, purely because my dad always had his own businesses. So at the dinner table, we were always talking about staff, and we're always talking about those sort of things. And I loved that conversation. So naturally in uni, when I was doing an organizational communications degree, I ended up going, sure, I'll do HR, one of those things where you're young and you just pick something. And I moved to London, got a job in HR, was in London for 5 years. The company that I was with moved me to Houston, Texas for a while doing HR. Then from there, I went to Gladstone. So it was like London, Houston, Texas, Gladstone, Queensland. So it was a little bit of a change, not that exciting. But it was there that I did like fly in, fly out. And it was probably the biggest point in my career where I was like, I'm doing all the things, and on paper, life looks really good. And I started to feel very disconnected from everything. I just wasn't completely happy. And I remember at the time, I couldn't language it in that way. It was all just, there was this funny feeling in my gut and my chest, and I didn't really know how to deal with it. So I actually threw myself into exercise. So when people might be listening, knowing that when it comes to fly in, fly out, you can sometimes go one of two ways. You can either just get super unhealthy because all you do is work, or you can get a little bit obsessive with the tiny time that you have off when you're not working. And that was Candice. And I was trying to cover something up. I was trying to make myself feel better in different ways, when really there was just a massive misalignment in my life. It was telling myself all these years that HR was what I wanted to do, in quotation marks, and finally getting there, and finally earning good money, and having traveled the world with it. And on paper, life looked really good, and I just wasn't feeling it. So I remember deciding that I'm going to have to change something up. And I ended up traveling for a year, because that's what people do to try and find themselves. Like it must have been in South America that I needed to find myself, or it had to be in India, or all the different places that I went for a year. But when I actually came back, I was like, I'm going to just do more study in terms of human behavior and be an even better HR person, because that's what I felt like I needed to do. And when I went and did a course in human behavior, which was a coaching course, I realized how much stuff I had to learn about myself. So it became a real, oh, wow, I didn't know a lot about my emotions. I didn't know that even life was allowed to be up and down. I actually thought that life was only meant to be positive. And if it was anything else, then, don't say anything. Like, that's embarrassing. Like, you failed if it's anything but. So I realized how much pressure I was putting on myself, and had to learn how to cry. Wasn't very good at that. Like, I used to get that real lump in my throat because I would hold it down. I was like happy Candice all the time. So I had to learn how to like show emotions, and I'm really good at it now. Like, if anything ticks me off, and I've got leaky eyes all over the place.
Me too. I used to, which is, some people who may not know me very well might be like, what do you mean? Like, she's so put together, and she's like this big boss businesswoman. But like, my boyfriend's like, she's like a faucet. Like, it's just, it flows so much all the time. And like, I used to cry watching like Neighbours, and like, it's bad. Like,
the weirdest things now tick me off, where I surprise myself. I'm like, Candice, that wasn't even sad, but I actually think I'm making up for lost time. It's like I didn't cry for so long. So now the tiniest little thing just gets me. Even if I'm happy, I cry. It's ridiculous. But yeah, I think that sort of just started it. And I stayed in HR and started studying. And I realized that I think the part of HR that I loved the most was the coaching element. I loved that employees and managers would come to me when they were stuck. They would come to me when they had difficult challenges or problems that they needed to be able to solve, and they had no idea how to do it. So they would come and speak to me. And that ended up being a very tiny part of HR. So for those of you who know HR, there's a lot of shit bits of HR in terms of making people redundant and performance management and yucky things. The coaching part was a small part. And it got to a point where I thought, I'm going to make my full-time job this small part of what I love the most. So it was a big deal at the time. I remember when I made the decision with my husband that I'm going to give this thing a go and I want to have a coaching business where I can help people who are feeling stuck in their work or in their life, wherever it is. My business has evolved since when I first started in 2018. So it's changed a few times. But initially it was just to make sure that people are loving their life both in and out of the workplace. That was a big thing for me because for so long I was just counting down until Friday. You know, I was really looking forward to the weekend. And when you do the maths, that's not great numbers if you're only loving Saturday and half of Sunday. So that was my work. And I remember my parents at the time too, they thought I was bonkers for leaving such a great paying job and to start a coaching business like every other Tom, Dick and Harry, exactly like you said. There's a few of them out there. So yeah, so I sort of just, I guess I went from there and started my business, and my business has evolved now to where I go into other businesses and I work with teams, and I feel like it's just been this beautiful circle where I look at how I was in the corporate environment and I would have loved a me. I know that sounds really strange, but I would have loved to have had someone help me to think different in the workplace, because my biggest believer is if you're thinking different, then you're behaving differently. And if you're behaving differently, you're getting different results. So I go into businesses and run team workshops. I work with people one-on-one. I have an online program, and it's all to help people think differently and shake them up a little bit. So that's me.
I love that. And I love, like, in the least, how am I trying to say this? In the least icky way possible, I get this vibe. You're like, I would have loved a me, as in, like, you fucking love yourself and you're not ashamed to be like, I love who I am and what I've created. And I think that's a really powerful tool to have. So I just want to say yay to you for celebrating you, because I think so many people don't celebrate themselves, and they're the last person to say, like, I'm doing a kick-ass job for all the stuff that I've been through and where I'm at right now.
Yeah, that's so beautiful the way that you reframe that. And I really do appreciate that too, because I think that, yeah, when you're able to say that too, when you're able to look at it going, you know, I'm doing a good thing, I'm making an impact, and also it's been really freaking hard to get to where I am as well. You know, I think I could have very easily stayed in HR and had a good life, to be honest. You know, like I talk about it going, there was misalignment and I was feeling disconnected and I wasn't happy and all that kind of thing, which sounds very dramatic. And also a lot of people will stick with that and just feel like they have to suck it up and feel like, you know, stop complaining and you've got a job and look how grateful you should be. And I totally can understand that side of it too. And I think that's what keeps people stuck for a very long time. Like, yes, they're earning good money. Yes, they're working their way up in their career, and there's still something missing and they feel like they can't explore that something missing. So it's a big deal to do that as well.
I was speaking to Monique Dolman, who's on a previous episode and we are mutual friends with, and I've known her for years, and she does life coaching and stuff with me at the moment. And she was saying, you know, something really similar in that, like, seemingly having it all or having all these things you want, and then like still feeling like it's not it, or it's not enough, or I want something different now, and that being like wrong and things like that. And I think sometimes when I talk to her on our coaching calls, I'm like, this is such a fucking first world problem. And she's like, but it's your problem, and it's still a problem for you, and it's okay. Like, just because other people have different problems, you know, it doesn't make yours any lesser. And I think sometimes I look at what I have and I'm like, I could stop work for 2 years and be totally fine and not have to make an extra single dollar and be good. And I'm not saying that to brag and be like, oh, look at how much money I got in the bank. It's to say that, like, now the challenges that I'm facing are like, how do I want to show up in the world, and what do I really want to give as value, as opposed to coming from a place of I have to fucking make money, or I have to sell this client into this program, otherwise I don't have money for X in my life. And so I feel like it's this common thing of you get to this place of success in your career or your business or whatever, and then you're like, hang on a second, like, have I been doing this just to climb the ladder, or just to do the things or tick the boxes, or what do I want to do, and what lights me up?
Yeah. Like your problems evolve, right? Like, you're never going to get to a stage where you're free of problems, or, you know, nothing scares you anymore. And if it does, it actually equals a very boring life. So it's like, you know, you think about how you were a year ago or how you were 2 years ago, the problems that you had back then, it's so different to the problems that you have right now. And it's all relative to the person that you are and the person that you've grown to be. And it's about allowing yourself to have the space, the time, the capacity to dig into who am I being right now and how do I want to solve this particular problem? What is the lifestyle that I want to live right now and what actually is important to me? And so often we can either come up with a problem and, like you said, feel like it's so minor and so small and just shove it down and not want to unpack it and hope that it goes away. Spoiler alert, it never goes away. If anything, it just gets bigger. But we have to give ourselves that time to unpack the little niggles that do pop up, because they are there. And in this fast-paced society that we now live in, there's always so much going on and there's not enough pausing to actually check in with ourselves and how we're going at the stage in our life. Yeah.
Yeah. And so talking about pausing, talking about reflection and things like that, you've got this little coined phrase that I love, which are called those Candice Harvey shake-ups, which is what you do when, my understanding is, you go into an organization and you shake shit up and then kind of like see what happens with that, I guess. But can you talk to us a little more about like what that actually is and what you're doing in these organizations to help support employees and business owners as well to create performing teams and things with your coaching?
I would love to. I was just laughing because it made it sound like you just go in, Candice, and you shake shit up and then you go, bye, see ya, like best of luck with that, you know. It can feel like that, I think, sometimes. But yeah, so the work that I do, I with obviously my background being in HR and having such a great understanding of human behavior, and you know what I mean by that is that really understanding why people do what they do, but also more importantly, understanding why people don't do what they wish they could do, right? Like that's a huge thing. Like we go through life and we're like, I wish I could do that, or I'd love to be able to do that, or I'd even love to be more productive at work, or I'd love to be getting things done or putting up my hand more or speaking up more or whatever it is. And we don't do it, you know? So the work that I do in businesses, so many different businesses and different industries will contact me purely for the reason of shaking their team up. And what that means is it's getting their team to think differently, because no matter what's going on for businesses, and everyone goes through such different chapters and different stints, that there are some businesses where, you know, they're going through a lot of change, or there are some businesses where they feel like there hasn't been a lot of change in a while. So people are kind of plodding and they're just going through the motions. Or there can be teams who have had brand new employees come on board, or even new management or whatever it is, and it's feeling maybe stale. It's feeling a little bit like we're not getting the best out of our people, you know, because there can be such a difference sometimes with when the manager will interview an employee and they've got all this energy and all this excitement and all this experience, and then they come on board and things are okay for a little while, and then all of a sudden it's, where is that person who I knew? Why are they not showing up the way that I thought they would actually show up? And because complacency comes on, you know, being overwhelmed comes on board, or, you know, a fear of being able to show up, all these sort of things come up, which is purely just being a human being. And what I do is, depending on what the theme is and what's going on for the business, I get them thinking differently. So there's always different topics that I do, whether it's running my Not Done Yet workshop, which is helping people to realize that there is so much more that they're capable of, and a lot of the excuses that get in the way, we chuck them in the bin by going through my 3 A's within that particular workshop. And it gets them finishing the workshop knowing exactly what's most important for the next few months, because we're not done yet, and gets them achieving more than they've ever been able to achieve before. Or if it is they are going through a really hectic time, one of my workshops is called Chaos to Calm, and it's all about helping them to manage themselves both in and out of the workplace, because gone are the days where it's all about, doesn't matter what's going on in your personal life, leave it at the door, then come into work, work your ass off, and then leave and do whatever you got to do at home. Like it's 2024 and we're not about that, right? So it's looking after yourself both in and out of the workplace is a real key point. But it is just about getting people to think differently, knowing that if they have brand new ways of being inside of work and outside of work, that it is going to create long lasting change. And I think that's why I was laughing before, where it's like I shake shit up and go, bye. It's all about shaking things up, but also giving people the tools and resources that they can instantly apply to set themselves up for long-term success, as opposed to just let's think differently. That was a little bit of fun. That was great. Who the hell is this Candice Harvey person? She's got a lot of energy and now she's gone. It's giving them the tools that they need to set themselves up for success. Yeah.
That's awesome. And so give me an example of like a signature think differently exercise or something that you would implement into one of these shake-up sessions.
Yeah. Oh my God, let me just pick one. I think so. One of my workshops that I do is called Strengths Fueled Future. So it's all about really understanding what comes naturally to each people individually in a team. So that they know it about themselves, but they also know the people that they spend so much time with day in, day out. They also know more about that other person. So one of the things of thinking differently is that we can so often assume that particular people that we work with have certain strengths, like they could look at you and just be like, oh, leadership must be your number one because, of the way that you hold yourself and the way that you present yourself. Or they could look at me and just think that, in terms of being courageous or bravery, like that must be number one. So we do this exercise where we all have to guess, everyone in the team, what their number one top strength must actually be. And we're all able to kind of share it, and everyone usually gets completely blown away, especially if the CEO's in the room, which sometimes happens. We can get CEOs actually joining in particular workshops. There are some where they're not allowed in there and we talk about them behind their back. So that's a very different one. But quite often when they are involved, and they'll think that they know people and they actually don't, like they'll be able to, like, even I always say to people, like, I would love you all to guess what my number one top strength is. And people will say the standard ones that I was just sort of saying, where they'll say, oh, it must be teamwork, or it must be like resilience, or whatever it is. And it's actually humor, right? My number one strength is humor. And what that actually means is that it's really easy for me to take quite heavy situations and make them a lot lighter, like for it to be a lot of a lighthearted conversation situation. And it means that I'm a lot more approachable as well. So even other people where, there might be a CEO and they'll think that leadership again must be their top strength, and it'll come back where curiosity is actually what they're best at, or creativity is what they're best at. And it allows people to kind of take their assumptions out of the workplace and go, oh my gosh, in order to actually know the people that I'm working with and get the most out of the people that I'm working with, I actually have to get to know them in a very different light than maybe what we do think a lot of the time. So that particular workshop is something that they all sort of walk away where they're completely blown away by knowing so much more about themselves, which people love knowing about themselves. They love being able to walk away with their list of all their strengths in a line, what they're best at and what they're not so great at. And also knowing the people around them, what they're good at, because then you can lean on people for different things, as opposed to feeling like you have to do all the things that you're maybe not so great at. You can actually give it to people who love doing those sort of tasks. So that's always a really cool one. Yeah, I love that.
And so is that, when you say yours is humor, is that you just picking that, or is this a test that you get them to do? Like, how do you find it?
Yeah, so everyone does an assessment when you're doing that. So yeah, and so they're not allowed to kind of share their answers or anything before they actually get there. So that's kind of the hardest part of the workshop, to be honest, for them to actually keep it a secret and not show their friends what their top strengths are.
We're back at school and there's no cheating.
And it's hilarious because they're all fully grown humans, right? And it's the biggest thing. And I always say, has everyone kept it a secret? And you can tell like two little besties in the back row will be like, yes, they haven't. They definitely haven't. But yeah, it's all just what comes naturally to people without them even trying, and humor. I used to be really embarrassed about that being my top strength, especially when I was working in HR and I was always worked in male dominated industries. So I was very often the only female at the leadership table when we were having management meetings, being a HR manager and everybody else. And when we would do strengths exercises and people would have all these really great, bold strengths, and there's Candice with humor, and I was like, oh, this is terrible. Like, how do I get another strength? Like, how do I be naturally better? How do I be born with something else that's not humor, And it took me a few years to start being proud of it and realize that a lot of my success was coming from people being so comfortable being around me. Even in my workshops now, they're a lot of fun. There's a lot of high vibe energy in the room where people who aren't invited to the session will walk past the boardroom or wherever we are and they'll be like, what is going on in there? And I do it for a reason, that the more fun that people are actually having, the more they're laughing and engaging and not taking themselves so seriously, the more open they are to learning something new. So it's definitely, there's reason behind it all, but it gets people leaving feeling a lot more relaxed and having absorbed so much more than if they're in an environment where it was quite stale and serious, which is not Candice Harvey.
I love that. And so this strength test, is this like something you've developed, or could we go and find that? Can we do it ourselves?
Yeah, love that you've done this. So you can absolutely go. So it's actually a free test. It's called the VIA Strengths Survey. So I can even send you the link if you like it. You can chuck it in the show notes with the episode. And yeah, people can do it for free, and you can look at it, and there's quite a bit of information on there already that you can have a squiz at. And it really is the unpack of it though as well. Like really, especially whether it's, you know, you do it with your partner or you do it even with family, all that sort of stuff. It's a very big eye opener, but especially from a team environment, that sort of perspective, then to look at it, where we're best placed, what are the kind of tasks that we have to do each and every day that maybe aren't our favorite. And then I do this part in the workshop where it's about fusing your strengths with the actual role that you do, so that we can look at some of the aspects in your position description that aren't so exciting, but if we start using our strengths, it becomes a lot easier. So that's a pretty important part of the workshop as well. So yeah.
Cool. I love that. I've literally just Googled that and I've already got the link, so don't worry about it.
Oh, look at you. You're all over it, babe. You're all over it.
I write notes at the same time so I can like ask questions. And
such a high achiever you are. Look at you.
Oh, look, I try. I was actually, speaking of high achievers, I was speaking to another person who I've had on the podcast recently who you also know, Mr. Andrew Komenos, and we're talking about high achievers versus high performers. And he was sort of saying like a high achiever is someone who like does things that at a high standard or whatnot, but a high performer is almost like a way of being. And so a high achiever may hold themselves to this impossible standard, but a high performer just gets up and like is consistent and does the hard shit. And I really liked that sort of shift or perspective in the difference. So aiming to be a high performer rather than a high achiever. It's not about the achievement. It's about the consistency and the doing the work. Yeah. Cool. So what does performance coaching mean and like look like to you? Because I feel like it's this big concept that's sort of thrown around, but like how do you package that? And when you say I'm a performance coach and someone says what the hell is that, like what do you say back?
And that always happens. It is very rare that I go I'm a performance coach and they go oh great, so what that means is, and they always get it wrong, or they'll ask me like if it's to do with sports all the time.
Which sporting team do you work with?
And it's like oh, and I've always struggled with the title to give myself. Like when I first started my coaching business, I was a career coach, you know, that made a lot of sense. And people who were in jobs that they weren't enjoying, especially with my background, they would come and work with me. And the best part of that was that the job is never the problem. Even HR was not the problem. It was a great job. Even the company that people will say is the problem, it's never the problem. It's just the relationship that we have with ourselves is something that we need to be able to unpack. So a lot of the time when people would come saying my job's the problem, I need to work out who I am so I can get a better job, we'd get to the end of coaching and people would say my job's actually fine now. Like I'm okay staying where I am because I'm feeling better. And it's like, yeah, I knew that was going to happen. So I'm glad that we were.
You're like, it was you were the problem.
You're the problem. No one else. Yeah. So yeah. And then I went on to just calling myself a coach. Like I dropped the career part. That was a nightmare because that was definitely like, oh, soccer, football. And I was like, stop it. And then especially when I worked with corporates, when that was becoming a really big part of the work that I was doing, performing, it was all about helping people to perform better than they're currently performing. Like that's the way that I explain it. So whether you are a business owner, whether you are, especially with my one-on-one coaching, whether you're an employee or a leader, or you do have a team, you don't have a team, even stay-at-home mums I've worked with as well before, because they can get to a point sometimes where they're like, who am I? Like I know that there's more that I can be doing right now, but I have no idea. So in its most simplest form, I help people to perform better than they're currently performing. And it is both in and out of the workplace. So majority of the time people come to me who are exceptional human beings and they want to be able to do everything and anything all at once, which is super cute because we all know that you can do everything that you want to do in this one life of yours, but you just can't do it all at once. That's just insanity. So we have to be able to look at what is most important for you now, and allow yourself to plant things or to put things to the side for you to attack in the next few months or next year or whatever it is, and still enjoying the life that you're actually living at the moment. So yeah, it's working with so many different people, even with teams as well. It's about looking at how they're currently performing and how can we improve the way that they're performing. So many people come to me who love to close their laptop at night at 11 p.m. and that just becomes normal for them. You know, they have no idea of how to actually close that laptop earlier because they've got so much work and they're so busy. And what actually happens is they've just got themselves into such a habit of having such a big window for work that they have no idea how to do 8 to 5 or whatever it is. Like since having my business, even though, as you would know, having a business sometimes can be hectic, I rarely have my laptop open past 5 o'clock. And it's a lot of discipline that goes into that as well. But it's also about knowing that if that's the standard that I want for myself, and it's absolutely the standard that I want for my clients, because I firmly believe that our work, doesn't matter how much you love it, and I love it so much. It gives me goosebumps whenever I talk about it. It is still only allowed to be one part of my life. You know, there are other areas of my life that deserve to have a big chunk of who I am and have my energy. And if that's the case, then we need to get smarter with our time and we need to work out what's actually most important and stop doing all the stuff that's not important, even though we tell ourselves it is, because not everything needs our attention all the time. So, yeah.
And so if, let's say as an example, you were working with me and you're like, all right, we need to look at what's most important for you right now.
Yeah.
What are the questions or activities, something that you would go through with me to help me figure that out?
Yeah. So we would do a lot of, to start with, I do a lot of behavioral assessment sort of stuff too. So I'm certified as an eDisc practitioner. So what that means is that we would actually do an assessment that would work out how you naturally perform and how you naturally behave. So without even thinking, how you just would love to be able to show up. And we also compare it in this assessment to how you're currently showing up right now. And that changes, right? So even I was doing an unpack for a client yesterday, and the themes that were coming out of it was just, there was so much pressure going on in her life. You know, she was having to really step up her she was placing a lot of boundaries on people. So there was a lot of leadership qualities that were taking over, and she's not naturally wired this way. So it's not to say that she's not capable of doing all of these things, but she's getting to the end of the day and the end of the week and the end of the month, and she's absolutely pooped at the moment because there's such a different way of how she's performing in her life that's different to how she actually is naturally. So we would actually look at that first, and we'd look at how you are wired and how you're showing up at the moment. We would then look at how your values are now, because your values change. You know, like I think even for someone like you as well, what you were valuing at the end of last year would be very different to how and the things that you're valuing at this midpoint in this year already, because you are evolving so often. There are so many things that are changing within you. And we'd really get clear, especially for the next half of this year, is what actually is important. Like, what's going to get you to the end of this year, looking back at 2024, going, holy shit, that was one of my best years I've ever had. Like, what would make it? So we'd actually work backwards and really together work out, is anything getting in the way to make this happen? Because that can happen a lot of time. There can be things like even self-esteem. There can be, confidence issues as well. There can be fear of failure. All these juicy bits and pieces can pop up that we would have to work through. But really making sure that progress is a massive part, and also contribution. So the two keys to fulfillment, what I help clients with, is progress and contribution. So we need to feel like we're moving, and we also need to feel like we're having an impact. And if one or the other isn't happening in your life, you will actually start to feel it. So you could actually feel like you're progressing, and that's how I used to feel in HR all the time. I was climbing that corporate ladder. That was great, but I didn't feel like I was contributing. Or I work with a lot of nurses, and they feel like all the time they're contributing, like they're doing such phenomenal work, but they're not actually progressing. So we have to make sure that we've got our hand on both of those things at all the times, if we want to be able to have a life where we're loving it Monday to Sunday.
Which I would hope that anyone listening to this feels that way.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah.
Yeah. Another thing that you mentioned before we jumped on was this concept that's coming up for you about stop dicking around. In true Candice fashion.
Dicking around. Yeah.
It's kind of like when you get to say a swear word and you're like, the teacher, miss, he said fuck. And then you get to, I felt like that's how it came out.
It did. It was like, you said it before, Candice, so I'm allowed to say it now. That's exactly how it came out. Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. And it's just this week. That's why I sort of brought it up with you, where I've had a few brand new clients sign up with me this week, which is really exciting. And when I sort of say to them, like, what was it that made you go, this is the time? Like, I want to work with Candice now. What was it? And two of them actually said to me, that was like, when you said we got to stop dicking around, I was like, holy shit, I need to stop dicking around. And for me, 2024 in terms of my personal life has just been huge this year. It has probably been the most testing year that I have had, and it's been fantastic, and it's been all the emotions. You know, earlier this year my mum got diagnosed with breast cancer, and that was just a huge shakeup. That was massive. She's doing phenomenally though now. She's doing really well, going through radiation, all that sort of stuff. My mother-in-law passed away. One of my dear friends in Sydney passed away only a couple of weeks ago. I've got a really close friend whose husband is going through a really big sickness at the moment as well. And it's just been a lot. And I think the best thing about all of this, even though it is sad and heartbreaking and things like this happen all the time because it's called life, it really gets you appreciating that we have one shot at this, I think, right? As far as we know, we get one shot at this. And we just don't have time to dick around. Like, we have no idea what's going on around the corner. We have no idea how long we have with ourselves, let alone how long we have with the most important people that we surround ourselves with. And if there are things that we want to do, if there are things that we have been thinking about for a really freaking long time, we have to stop dicking around. We have to make that decision to do something now. And if you have no idea where to start, get support, start speaking to people. There are so many options, but pick one and actually start doing something about it.
And stop wasting time staying stuck with something else that you also said. And I feel like we're also speaking about off air, like, you know, if you don't know what to do with that, then like go and ask someone who does. And I sort of wrote a note here for myself that says, you aren't a hero for doing it alone.
Oh, and like mic drop right there, babe. Like, that is just, it's huge. Like, I would say that so many times to my clients where, you know, they try and figure it out on their own. And I was like, no one gets a prize for doing it on your own. Like, no one's does anything. And at the end of it, they're like, oh, and by the way, I never asked anyone a question. I did it all on my own and it took me so long, but I never, so what? You know, like, there is no prize for that. And I was actually saying just earlier on a live, I was saying that staying stuck is actually a choice. Like, people who are just whinging and are not getting the results that they want to be getting are choosing to stay stuck, you know? So you got to unstuck yourself, get unstuck and start speaking to more people who are getting the results that you're busting to have, and just start hanging around those people or ask them more questions. And bit by bit, you can start getting the results that you're wanting to get.
I love that. Actually, another person on the podcast just seems to be like in my in my circle at the moment, but a friend of mine, Loz, she has just written a book called Get the Fuck Unstuck. I love that. It's just like a really potent, really powerful, but I think that that's such a big thing. And like, even I've noticed myself being like in this moment of like, you know, there is a little bit of friction of like, you know, progress versus contribution, like you said, or the, you know, what is next. And I feel like, you know, that place can be a bit of a scary one, being like, I'm almost sometimes feels like shedding this old identity and stepping into like, what is the next iteration of who I am. So let's say there's someone listening to this who's like, okay, I do need to get unstuck. Is there anything that you would recommend that they do, or where they start? I know we've talked about, you know, a fair bit of actual implementation stuff today, but someone who's just feeling like what I'm doing is not it and I need to do something different, what could they do as like a next step?
Yeah, I love this. I mean, there's a bucket load of things, right? And it definitely depends on the type of person that they are. And if they're, I think the majority of the time people who are feeling stuck and who don't know what to do can get very hooked on the doing. You know, they can get very hooked on, I'll try this, I'll do this, you know, on Monday, I'll start doing more of this, or I'll start taking this more seriously. And it can feel very exhausting, right? As opposed to calming down on the human doing and getting back to being a human being, you know, which means actually giving yourself more time and space to work things out. You know, I was just speaking to a beautiful lady this morning who I caught up with for coffee, who wants to start working with me as well. And she said that she's finally starting to give herself space and time to work out what it is that she wants. So instead of having something else on your to-do list and, you know, trying something new or whatever it is, just first start mapping out time for you. And whatever you end up doing with that time is completely up to you. You know, whether you decide to look into meditation, or you decide to start reading, or you decide to start, you know, doing some sort of breath work, or whatever it is, like choose what you want to do, journaling, whatever, but start mapping out time in your day that is purposely not to do all the time, and start getting back to connecting with who you are and giving yourself time to do that, because it's, yeah, you need to give yourself time.
And so do you find that most people have that within them? Because I think I've heard conflicting things on this, right? Where some people, it's like if they're stuck, sometimes you can stay in that like thinking space for far too long. And you're like, I have thought and nothing's really come to me. And so perhaps doing or trying different things could be the solution. When you're saying like stop being a human doing and be a human being, is that like conscious journaling time? I know you sort of mentioned that as one of the options, but like how do you determine when you've been thinking for so long that you need to actually move and create some momentum, even if it's momentum in a direction that you choose to change later?
Yeah. So human, like when you're being a human being, you're actually into the feeling, right? Like you're more connected with your body as opposed to getting out of your head. You know, like we do enough thinking to friggin' sink a ship. Like we definitely don't need to think through anything else. You know, like there are people out, and that's why I said this is a bit of a tricky question to answer, because everyone is so different in terms of what they need to unstuck themselves. Like there are people who need to actually pull their finger out and start doing a lot more because they're doing next to nothing, right? And there are also people who are just doing way too much. Like I've worked with people before and they'll come and do one of my programs and they have like 4 other programs that they've purchased. Like it's insane, you know, because they're just constantly trying to figure out more about themselves and best ways to do things. And they're complicating things, and they'd be the people where it's like, you need to woozah a little bit, feel into who you are, how you're actually going. And it's not to sit there and allow yourself to think and go crazy, but it's get connected to you and what do you need right now. You know, like it's one of the biggest things that I remind my clients to start doing, and a lot of them have never done it ever, where it's starting each day going, what do I actually need right now? You know, and I have to do that to myself all the time, because we can very easily get ourselves in a routine, especially when we're trying to unstuck ourselves too, where it's like, well, I have to start every day and I have to go to the gym and I have to eat a certain way and I have to do this and do this and do that. And there are some mornings where your body literally doesn't want you to do that. And so on those days, even though for me, movement every single day is so important, but the intensity of that movement might change. You know, what my body needs might be restorative yoga, or it needs just a really long walk, or it does need some cardio, or it does need some weight training, whatever it is. But we very rarely check in with our body and go, what do you actually need right now? So, yeah, I feel like I just got excited then. I have no idea what the question was that you asked me, but there was somewhere, I don't know.
It was about, do we go and do and take action, or do we sit and reflect, and how do we decide which one? Because I just feel like there's a rabbit hole of people who will just think and think and think and think and think, and then they've just thought themselves out of the thought and just work their way out of, oh, that's not for me. And they're like, and now I'm still back here, but I did the thing, which was thinking.
And it's knowing, again, more about yourself. Like, am I someone who does that? Exactly like you were saying. Like, do I overthink? And people do know themselves really well. Like, especially people who are listening to this podcast, like they are open to learning new things and new ways of being. So they would know that if they're more of a doer, or they'd know if they were people who are connected to themselves, whatever it is. But if we're talking about being unstuck, do the thing that you don't typically do. Try something else, you know, go the opposite way, see how it feels, see how it fits, and start from there, you know?
Yeah. I feel like, you're so right. People absolutely know. And I'm absolutely a culprit of a lot of doing and not enough stopping and thinking, which I don't think is probably huge news to anybody who's listening. But like literally, for me to sit and not do anything. I'm like, I'm not being productive. Like I'm not working my business. Like it just, all these things come up for me. And it's so funny because my partner is the direct opposite. And so he will typically overthink everything. And he's like, I actually love that you feel so uncomfortable when I have to, like when I'm like, no, it's a you night. You can't hang out with me. Like you have to do something that's not work because you've said that that's important to you. And also you can't just talk to me the whole night. And I will be so like viscerally uncomfortable. And I'm like, oh, but maybe like we could just hang out tonight instead. Cause like, I just won't see you tomorrow. And he's like, no, you have to do this. And it just, I think, we absolutely know if we're an overthinker or an overdoer.
Yeah. There will be people listening
that's
to this,
me.
and they'll be listening to this going, same. That's so me, same. And it happened, it was only a couple of years ago for me as well, where the coach that I was working with at the time, she actually gave me an assignment because I went to her and all my plans for whatever reason on a weekend got changed. And I was like, oh, great. Like I'll contact my coach and I'll ask her, what does she think I should be doing for the next step and to evolve and all this sort of stuff. This is like in the early stages of my business. And she could hear like this panic in my voice where I was like, give me all the things and I will do it. I will smash them out. And she said, this weekend, I want you to do nothing. And I remember that feeling, like I got angry. I was like, what? You just want me to do nothing? Like I'm paying you all this freaking money. And this weekend, I'm getting like, what do I do with my hands? Right? Like it was like nothing.
What is nothing?
Yeah.
What do you mean? Like, but how do I do nothing, but also be productive at nothing?
Yeah. Like, is there steps to doing nothing? Do I need to write something down? Like, had no idea. And I remember telling my husband, he freaked out. He was like, oh shit, she's about to do nothing this weekend. Like I am the sort of person, used to be, on the weekend, I'd still write a list. I'm going to go for a walk and then we'll come back and I'll make some like hummus from scratch and then we'll do this. And I'd tick it all off. Like I was so intense, and there's no way I do that sort of stuff now. I'm so much better at chilling the F out. But back then it was awful. And I always say to people, the weekend that I did nothing was the beginning of everything for me, because I cried at random moments. I was annoyed when my husband was cleaning out the cupboard because I was like, why are you cleaning the cupboard? I can't clean the cupboard. And he was like, oh my God, this is going to be the longest weekend of my life. And it was, but it was a brilliant thing to realize that we can't just keep doing all the time. We're allowed to chill out. And also I realized when I chill out, I'm so much better. I'm an incredible coach when I've allowed myself to rejuvenate and done next to nothing, as opposed to how I used to be, where I was just go all the time.
And I think when we say do nothing, like I literally had this list. It feels so silly to say out loud. And my partner's like, no, this is a great thing for you. But it's like in my downtime, I have a list of like things that I can do that I will enjoy that are not doing, right? It's like, I can listen to a podcast or I can go to the sauna or I can do some mobility or I can, I don't know, like color in or do some baking or just like really like light, low activities that are not like, you must get 17 repetitions of X.
But your version of nothing is very different to someone else's version of nothing, right? Like someone listening to that where they're like thinking of your list, they're like, that's a hectic day. Like that's hectic. And that's the best part as well about, even when I coach people, it's not about having them live my life, because that would be horrendous for some people. Whereas I love it. My life is amazing. And I've learned what's best for me and my energy type and how to structure it and all that kind of thing. But that it's not about giving that to somebody else. It's about them being able to create, like, how do I work best? What does relaxing mean to me? What does being productive mean to me? All those sort of things that so many people actually have no idea about. So,
And just like figuring out and learning more about yourself, I think is what I continue to get reinforced. And usually the answers that we need come in the places we least want to look.
100%. 100%. It's fun, isn't it? It's really fun.
Personal development is great. I'm crying or frustrated or mad all the time.
It's true.
Goodness. So we might finish up, but what I would love to finish on, which is a little tradition on our potty, is asking you the question: if someone's listening to this and they maybe need a bit of a shake up in their life, what is one actionable item that you could have them do to help get a little more unstuck?
Oh, okay. So we sort of answered this before, didn't we? But I'll try and think of it a different way. So one thing, so is it to get unstuck or to shake them up a little bit?
You can choose, or we can do one of each. But I guess the idea being that we want these episodes to have people go away and take action on something. Yeah, just to move them forward.
Well, I guess, let's do it it's a bit of both, like to unstuck yourself and to shake yourself up. We'll do a little bit of a combination one. And it follows on from what we were talking about before. I think that people listening to this will know if they are more in the chaotic space at the moment, if they are feeling like over the last month or so they have been doing a lot and they've been racing around and they've been striving and all that sort of stuff. They'll know listening to this. There'll be people going, that's me. I'm there. I don't even need to listen to the other option. And the other side of it, where people are having quite a calm couple of months, like where maybe they've been going super easy on themselves and they've been allowing themselves to take it a lot more easy and trying things that are a lot more slower pace. And as a result, they may not have been getting as much done, right? So we're either in the chaos space or the calm space. And I would love for these people, wherever camp you're actually sitting at the moment, your task for the next week is to actually do something of the opposite camp. So if you have been sitting in the calm space for the last couple of months, I would love you to pick something that you can do next week that is actually about doing something, that's actually about stepping up, that's actually about achieving something, that when you get to the end of the week, you're like, oh my God, I shook myself up. I actually did that. Like that was different. And it might feel a little bit uncomfortable, especially if you've been getting a little bit cozy and cute in this calm state. To do something that feels a bit chaotic might feel big. Right? So that's that task. And then for people who have been sitting in chaos where it has been go, 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 your goal for next week is to pick something that's going to calm you that shit down, right? Like something that actually slows you down, whether it's giving yourself an hour or giving yourself even 10 minutes each day where it is purely to go and sit out on the deck, sit out on the grass, sit out. It's actually really freezing at the moment, but do something that is about being more of a human being, whether you just want to read or meditate or listen to something that you've never really done before, but you know that it would probably calm you down. So the idea is that we're trying something different to get us thinking differently. And if we're doing things differently and thinking differently, we'll be getting a different result. So that's my thing.
Awesome. I love that. Thank you so much. So if people are like, fuck, I need a little more Candice in my life, how can they find you, reach out? What do we do?
Yeah. So I hang out a lot on Instagram. So Candice Harvey, check me out there. Always please come and chat to me in my DMs. I love speaking to new people, especially if you've watched the episode, listened to the episode, come and say hi. And yeah, we'll go from there.
Beautiful. Amazing. Thank you so much.
Thanks,
have a fantastic
babe. Thanks
day.
for having me. See you later.
Bye.
Bye.
Just a quick reminder before you go, that link is waiting for you in the show notes if you are a health coach who is in business looking to grow or scale. We have options for both, and I am super excited to be working with a few individuals who are ready to take their business to the next level. If that sounds like you, chuck down and have a look at the show notes and you can apply through there, and I will talk to you one-on-one and we can figure out if this is right for you. I cannot wait to chat.
I have a tiny favor to ask of you, and that is to just hit that subscribe button if you have not done it yet. If you've made it this far, then I hope that this has been valuable for you and for us to get more incredible guests in front of your earlobes and faces. If you're watching us on YouTube, then please do that now. And if you have any feedback or suggestions for me, or something that was a golden nugget that really stood out to you in this episode, I would absolutely love if you flicked me a message over on Instagram at Xenia Wood Official. Until next episode, and in whatever you do, move swiftly.